Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com and Real Ag Radio. We're broadcasting today from Grow Canada in Calgary, Alberta. Big thanks to Syngenta Canada for being our sponsor of the coverage of this year's conference. Right now we are joined by the Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Grain Commission, Patty Miller. Hey, Patty, how's it going?
It's good. Going well, thank you.
You enjoying the conference?
Yeah, they always have such a great turnout here and super speakers. Like, it's very motivating and it stretches your mind. So it's really great to be here.
Yeah, speakers inside our bubble and outside of our bubble, which is always good. It's always good.
Exactly.
Okay, we are going to talk about, I would say, besides the weather, this issue of falling number and the impact it's had on farmers and the grading. Well, we're going to get into it because I think it's confusing. And for good reason. It's kind of a fresh topic to Western Canada. Now in Ontario, farmers have been dealing with elevator, like, as they pull in, they dump their grain. They've been dealing with falling number for a while. Western Canada, this is a new thing. So what's happening, just so everybody is fresh, is that some people's grain, wheat, once it's being delivered at the elevator, it's being discounted because of falling number. Is that allowed? Can they do that?
Yes, they can if it's part of the contract and the contract specifications. So let's take just a little bit of a step back.
Please do, because I want to get the full, I want to get the information out there.
It's not a Twitter conversation. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So if you think about our grading system, we've got a system based on the visual look of the grain. So you have how the grain looks is a proxy for the quality. And when you have a system like that, you can move grain through elevators fairly quickly, fairly efficiently at a fairly low cost. But as science moves along, as technology moves along, as you can actually measure aspects of quality, you want to use those things. If a tool is fast, if the results are really reproducible, if it can be done in an elevator when a farmer delivers grain, you want to use that because, that mechanical measurement is something that's going to be really, really accurate. Now, in the case of dawn and falling number, back in March, we actually had consultations with the industry or discussion. We put out a discussion paper and asked people to comment on it because we were wondering, are we at that point with dawn and falling number? Companies use it when they sell to millers and sell to people around the world. So are we in a place where the technology is there? We can get really reproducible results. We can get them quickly, and it doesn't add a lot of cost to the system. And the response that we got back was largely, I don't think we're ready yet.
And that was in the spring.
That was in the spring. And then this year came along. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how that discussion would happen now.
Mixed messages.
It is really mixed messages. What we heard from that spring consultation is it will add cost to the system. We think farmers are going to pay that cost. It might slow things down. And one of the challenges is measuring dawn and falling number is really finicky. Right? You have to really use the correct sampling protocol. You have to use the equipment correctly. And there's still, even with that, there's a variability with dawn and falling numbers. So, writ large, the feedback to us was, we're not ready yet. We like technology to measure things, but with this one, we're not ready yet. And then this year happened. So, when a farmer delivers to an elevator, the wheat gets graded. But if they signed a contract that includes other specifications like dawn and falling number, and there's a discount schedule there, it's a contract. And so, the best defense for a producer is to look at that contract and make sure they understand what they're signing and make sure they understand those discounts.
Because right now we have sort of dual systems going on.
I know.
And both, in a year like this, both those systems are kind of working against people.
Yeah, it is really challenging. You've got pockets of the prairies where people are doing, they've had a really good crop. when they've got high quality grain or wheat and they've got good dawn and falling numbers, and yet masses of other areas where it's been a real challenge.
Is this like a U.S. style? Is this how they do it in the U.S.? Do they judge on things like falling? They
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. If a farmer delivers into the U.S. system, they'll have a contract, and they'll have dawn and falling number built into that contract, so you see what's there, and you see, but you also have a sample that you agree on. And
so, common question I'm sure you've gotten a lot when you talk to farmers is, okay, why doesn't the Grain Commission do something about this? What's the answer to that?
So it would need to be added to our grading system for us to be able to use tools like subject to grade and dockage. So if there's a dispute at the elevator, then a producer would be able to send samples, or not the producer, I mean there'd be a sample sent to us by the agreed to sample sent to us, and we would be able to evaluate the dawn and falling number. But because it's not part of the statutory grading system, we don't have access to that tool for farmers.
Okay, so to me, it's what would be the incentive at this point for grain companies to want the legislation to change, because they've been able to include falling number just through basically contract law instead of actually having it in the legislation? So would even the fact that this has happened this fall, I'm not sure the motive or the initiative to get it in the legislation really changes. The answer may not be any different if they had the conversation today. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So what is when you say legislation, which specific legislation are you talking about?
The Canada Grain Act.
The Canada Grain Act.
Yeah.
Okay. And how often does something like that get reviewed or talked about? That probably is a long answer, but just so everybody has an understanding of all this stuff, because sometimes we take some of this information for granted.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So there have been changes to the Canada Grain Act over the years, but in its entirety, it's been about 50 years since we've taken a good, fulsome look at it.
50?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
It was like when I was in high school. That's a lot. No.
Patty.
No, I think it was no, maybe my math's bad. It was in the 70s.
Okay.
It was in the 70s. And so, there have been changes like the removal of inward weighing and inspection. So that was one real significant operational change. But looking at the Act in its entirety, it's been a very long time. And technology's changed. The industry's changed. There's no longer a wheat board. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that I think we, as an industry, really, and farmers, companies, government, really need to look at it and say, is this serving the needs of the country, of our sector? Can we do things better? I don't think, the fundamental mandate or the vision of the Canada Grain Act is ever really argued with. You want a system that gives you dependable, high-quality grain. And you want to make sure farmers get paid for what they deliver.
Absolutely.
So those that vision is solid, but how we deliver on that, times have changed, and I think we need to look at it and see whether or not there are some better ways of doing things. But it's not just a philosophical thing. I mean, it's complicated, right? We've built a very intricate system, and so we need to look at these things carefully, and we need to have some really good analysis and thoughtful discussion about it.
Well, and here's the part that, from my standpoint, I try to, what are some of the issues or the problems I see here? And one of them is, a question that I have is based on the elevator system we currently have, which is not real segmented wooden elevators all over the prairies anymore.
Yeah.
We have very, very large concrete structures. So one of my questions is that a lot of people don't want to answer or haven't answered for me is, we're discounting based on falling number, which is kind of a finicky test. I'm using your words.
Yep.
It's a finicky test. And then doesn't it all end up in the same big concrete structure, not segregated anyways? That's the frustration that I kind of have, and I can't get it answered.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. Finicky is my sciencey word.
I like it.
So one of the things with falling number is it's not something that you can blend to improve, right? It's not like protein. You can't blend and sort of up the overall quality of the crop. You need to segregate the good stuff from the stuff that's maybe got a lower falling number that could be useful for a different market.
Okay.
So I think, grain companies have a challenging year on their hands. And
They do.
not to speak, on their behalf, but there's a lot more management that's going to be involved in making sure that you're hitting the right falling number for the right market and the right product. And so, it doesn't just all get blended into one nice
and
better
so
quality.
Because I heard this last night at the reception, somebody else had told me the blending is not a real simple thing. Why is that? Do you know?
Well, I think and here we're going down a science path. Somebody who uses finicky that's a very short road there.
I've been warned.
You have been warned. It's something that's relates to a smaller number of kernels, so you can't necessarily blend the product away by pulling out the kernels that have challenges and putting them with better ones, and you get a better overall number. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I encourage people to participate in the Harvest Sample Program.
Thank you.
Because there's a good example where if there are lots of discounts being put out there in terms of falling number, you need to know what your numbers are.
Absolutely. So we've extended the deadline for the Harvest Sample Program again down to December 31st because people have had such a struggle this year in getting
Absolutely.
the crop in. So giving people more time to get those samples in, and as you said, it's the sampling is really, really important. Getting a number from us doesn't guarantee you're going to get the same number from the elevator, but you're going to go in there a little more educated in terms of what you've got.
How wide of a range can that be?
You mean in terms of the results?
Yeah.
That's a really good question, but
Okay.
it can be fairly significant. And again, the sampling is a really important part of that.
Okay, final question here. I watched the Ag Leaders debate heading into the election. There was a lot of talk about some stuff, not a lot about some of the things I was disappointed they didn't talk about. Is there any inclination or push here in the mandate letters to possibly changes to the Canadian Grain Act coming up?
Well, it was a commitment from the Liberal government that they would look at the Canada Grain Act. It was talked about in the 2019 budget. I think both the Conservatives and the Liberal parties had it as part of their platform. So I don't think it's a lack of recognition about the need for reform. I think the challenge will be where does it sit in the overall priorities of the government, and that's something that elected officials are going to have to decide. I mean, I know I've been at the CGC for 3 years, and this has been a topic since I first walked in the door. Many attempts have been made, as you know, to get the legislation through the House. So it's not a lack of awareness. It's where it fits in the overall priority.
Patty, thanks a lot for joining us and trying to shed some light and information on this topic that has a lot of, obviously grain companies have a position, farmers, they're trying to find some answers, and hopefully we're able to fill some gaps for some people today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And, if you ever want to have a better technical explanation of it, I'd love for you to talk to one of our scientists. They're much better on that side than I am, but hopefully we've clarified some of it.
Thanks a lot, Patty.
Thank you.